He was born a Thracian, destined to fight as a soldier, yet history knows him as Spartacus, the slave who ignited the largest rebellion Rome ever faced. But behind the legend lies a deeper question. What did captivity and violence do to his mind? Explore the true psychology behind Spartacus and discover what made a man risk everything against an empire. The answer might challenge everything you thought you knew. In the rugged lands north of the Aegean, Thrace carved its people from hardship. Ancient writers, Plutarch and Appian among them, trace Spartacus's beginnings to this wild borderland, where tribes survived by the sword and loyalty was measured in blood and oath. The Thracians were famed for their ferocity, hired as mercenaries by kings and feared by their neighbors. Their rites honored war, their songs remembered the fallen, and their sons learned early that life and freedom were never secure. Spartacus grew up in this world, shaped by a culture that prized resilience and cunning above all. He was likely trained as a soldier, perhaps part of a Thracian auxiliary, fighting in the ceaseless skirmishes that marked the region's shifting alliances. The rhythms of battle, the code of honor, and the ever-present threat of betrayal formed the backdrop to his youth. Plutarch describes him as more Hellenic than Thracian, hinting at a mind sharpened by both native tradition and the influence of the Greek world, a rare combination in a time when most were defined by the tribe alone. But even in a land of warriors, fate could turn swiftly. No records remain of the exact moment Spartacus was taken, only that he was captured, perhaps in a border raid, perhaps betrayed by shifting loyalties, and sold into slavery. The loss was total. Homeland, comrades, identity. Yet the lessons of Thrace, endurance, resourcefulness, the memory of freedom, remained. In the shadow of his new bondage, these roots would become both a burden and a source of strength, shaping the man who would one day challenge the might of Rome itself. Capua's gladiatorial school operated like a machine for breaking and reforging men. Sold into the hands of Lentulus Batiatus, Spartacus entered a world where every hour was measured by drills, punishments, and the constant threat of death. The regimen was relentless. Days began before dawn, bodies hardened by swinging heavy wooden swords, bones thickened by diets rich in barley and beans, muscles rebuilt around old wounds. Ancient walls bore the scars of whips and the silent tally of failed escape attempts. Defiance meant confinement, humiliation, or worse. Gladiators lived under the gaze of trainers and guards, but the greater enemy was the ritual violence itself. Each mock battle rehearsed the real thing. Survival demanded more than brute force. It called for a mind capable of splitting pain from purpose, of hiding fear behind a mask of calm. Modern trauma experts recognize these patterns. Dissociation, hypervigilance, a focus that narrows to the next heartbeat, the next move. Bonds formed in the barracks, among men who shared wounds and secrets, became a lifeline. Trust was currency, betrayal a death sentence. Yet the arena offered a twisted kind of agency. In the sand, Spartacus learned to read opponents, to improvise under pressure, to command his own body at the edge of exhaustion. The scars on his arms and the set of his jaw told of battles survived, of identity rebuilt through ordeal. In this crucible, the lessons of Thrace met the discipline of Rome. The mind that would one day challenge an empire was tempered here, through deprivation, through violence, and through the fragile hope that even in chains, a man might choose his own fate. A storm broke inside the walls of Capua. Word spread in whispers. Discovery was near. 78 men, Spartacus among them, moved as shadows through the kitchens and storerooms. There was no arsenal for them, only what their hands could seize. Cleavers, spits, broken tiles. The iron of daily labor turned sudden weapons. Guards fell, surprised by the fury and coordination of desperate men who had trained for death but now fought for life. The city's streets offered no safety. The rebels cut their way out, slipping through alleys, scattering Roman pursuit in the confusion. Blood marked their passage, but so did an uncanny discipline. No wild flight, no chaos. They gathered at the edge of the city, counting their wounded, dividing the spoils of their first victory. Not gold, but freedom's first breath. Mount Vesuvius loomed above, its slopes steep and wild. The fugitives climbed, seeking a vantage point and a refuge that Roman patrols would hesitate to breach. From the heights, they could watch the roads, plan each movement, and for the first time speak openly as free men. The mountain offered more than shelter. It gave them time to organize, to forge a purpose from survival. Among them, Spartacus took no crown, but his calm in the chaos, his quick judgment, set him apart. He listened as others argued, weighed risks, and began to shape the group into something more than a band of fugitives. In the cold air above the plains, the first outlines of strategy formed. Escape was no longer enough. The men who had once fought for the amusement of Rome now prepared to fight for each other, and for the hope that freedom could be more than a moment snatched in the dark. On the slopes of Vesuvius, the rebels faced a new challenge: how to live together as something more than fugitives. They were a gathering of strangers, Thracians, Gauls, Greeks, and Romans, each carrying scars from the arena and the lash. Yet in the cold and hunger of the mountain camps, a fragile unity began to take root. Spartacus insisted that all spoils, food, weapons, even simple comforts, be divided equally. This was no small gesture. In a world ruled by hierarchy and privilege, the promise of equal shares was radical. Ancient chroniclers note how this practice set the group apart, creating a sense of justice that reached beyond mere survival. No one hoarded, no one starved alone. The camp became a rough brotherhood, bound by necessity, but also by a shared sense of dignity, reclaimed. When death came, as it often did, the rebels honored their fallen with rites drawn from both old homelands and new bonds. They held funeral games, echoes of the gladiatorial contests they had once fought for the amusement of others, now transformed into acts of mourning and remembrance. Each burial was a vow, a way to remind the living that their struggle was not only for themselves, but for those lost along the way. These rituals, half pagan, half defiant, wove the group into something stronger than fear could unravel. Spartacus did not stand above these acts. He joined in the sharing, the mourning, the decisions of the council. His authority grew not from command, but from empathy, a leader who understood that freedom, if it was to last, must be built from trust and the memory of suffering shared. Snow gathered on the alpine passes as the rebel camp argued beneath darkened skies. Spartacus pressed for escape, north over the mountains, to home and freedom. Ancient accounts say he urged his followers to seize the chance, to dissolve into the forests and hills beyond Rome's reach. Yet the rebel host, swollen with victory and hope, hesitated. Some hungered for plunder, others for vengeance. Few trusted that the world beyond the Alps would offer safety or welcome. The moment passed. Southward the army turned, back into the jaws of Roman power. Crassus, now commanding Rome's response, brought a new kind of terror. After his legate's defeat, he revived an ancient punishment: decimation. Every 10th man in the disgraced cohorts was executed by lot, the survivors forced to watch. The message was unmistakable: cowardice would be met with death, and discipline restored through fear. The war had entered its final merciless phase. Choices narrowed. For Spartacus and his followers, the road ahead offered only blood and ruin, and Pompey's legions caught the last fugitives in northern Italy, cutting off escape. His dispatch to Rome claimed the final victory, though the main battle had already ended in ruin. Along the Appian Way, the aftermath became a spectacle of warning. Ancient writers, Appian, Florus, describe thousands crucified, with Appian naming 6,000 crosses lining the road from Capua to Rome. Modern historians urge caution. The number may be less, but the intent was unmistakable. The crosses stood as a message. Defiance would be met with suffering beyond death. Survivors vanished, hope buried beneath the weight of Roman reprisal. The memory of those bodies, suspended in silence, haunted the road for generations, a scar on the land and on the minds of those who dreamed of freedom. Ancient sources record that 6,000 followers of Spartacus were crucified along the Appian Way, a figure cited by Appian and Florus. The evidence shows Spartacus was not merely a product of Thracian origins or gladiatorial training. He became a symbol through leadership rooted in shared suffering and a commitment to egalitarian principles. Yet many details remain uncertain. No direct writings from Spartacus survive, and the motives behind his crucial decisions, such as rejecting escape over the Alps, are still debated among historians. What is clear is that the psychological scars of captivity and loss forged resilience that inspired thousands to follow him. Spartacus's rebellion forced Rome to confront its own systems of control, leaving a legacy that endures in discussions of freedom and resistance. Today, his story is preserved through the fragments of ancient texts and the questions they leave behind.